Today we've got a tall homeowner who was tired of hitting his head on the beam every time he came down the stairs and turned left. We have recessed a section of this beam up into the joist bay. Now we could have done all of the beam, but the problem is you've got ductwork that's running through over the top of the beam. That creates a problem because then you have to route the ductwork underneath the beam, which exacerbates the problem you had in the first place. We've chosen to just recess a section of the beam. We have supported each side of the floor joist. These joists on this house, they lapped on top of the beam rather than being what we call clear span, where you have a continuous joist from one side of the house to the other. So when we supported these joists, all we did was take the vertical load off of the beam. We didn't jack the house up, we just took the edge off of things to allow us to get the beam out from underneath the joist without the joist collapsing. There was no perceptible movement upstairs, there was no cracked plaster, stuck doors, anything like that. It was imperceptible from the main floor. We cut out the section of the beam to be recessed. We have trimmed the joist to fit. And we've recessed the beam up in the joist bay. And now we are hanging the joists who previously sat on top of the beam with joist hangers. So we did have to start with longer columns. In order to avoid having to pour a new footing, we have simply notched the column to accommodate both the old beam and the new beam. We've added some post hardware here. We've got some nails here. That was more than adequate. Code requires a lot of hardware that's really pretty redundant. It's essentially there to avoid a condition that's never been observed to happen, which is a post walking out from underneath a beam in an earthquake. Structurally, there is no difference now than there was before we recessed the beam. It's just a different configuration. It took a little bit of time. I think we spent about half a day on this. This was a fairly practical, cost-effective measure. We also could have recessed the entire beam. We could have installed a larger beam, which would allow us to have these columns further apart. We could have put in a steel beam. Obviously there are cost considerations to take into account in choosing what works for you. This worked for this house.